The world of Formula One is burning with speed, to say the least. And during any 22-race season, let's just say every driver is gonna have their bad moments. Whether that's a terrible weekend or a poor misjudgment on a track, even the legendary ones have had their regrets. With that being said, we've put together a list of the most insane crashes in F1 history. So, without further ado, let's kickstart this video. First up at number 9, Lance Stroll at the Tuscan Grand Prix. Let's just say that Stroll seemed to be a pretty strong contender for a podium at Mugello, as he went on to hunt down the Honey Badger for a third. But everything didn't exactly go as he planned when a failure at the rear of his racing point sent the Canadian spearing off at the high-speed Arrabiata corner. And right after that, his car smoldered, because of which all of those updates brought by the team for the race were pretty much useless now. Having said that, we're still pretty glad Lance was safe after the crash. Since the impact was side-on, it allowed for a much larger spread of energy dissipation across the chassis, especially considering the fact that the crash happened at the fastest corner on the track anyway. Later on, the team revealed that the crash had definitely shaken Stroll's confidence so much that it lingered on him in the next few races. Needless to say, that led him to a barren run of results. Next up at number 8, Charles Leclerc at the Italian Grand Prix. Back at Monza, Leclerc was in fine form and ready for the race. In fact, he even made his way up to 4th in a Ferrari. And since Lewis Hamilton got himself an impending penalty, a podium was definitely a shining opportunity for Leclerc. Having said that, not too long after the safety car restart, the F1 driver went sliding off the road at the Parabolica, directly hitting the barriers at the final corner. And if you hadn't guessed it already, the force of the impact was so damn intense that the front left wheel literally ripped from the chassis as the car lodged itself right under the belt of the barrier. All Leclerc could say over the team radio was, "That was a big crash." Honestly, we're just glad he was alright. Not to mention, we've got Ayrton Senna at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix at number 7. There's no doubt that Senna is one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history, who even won 3 championships in a row from 1988 to 1991. And when he switched teams in the offseason, he wasn't really off to a great start back in 1994. In fact, right after Ronald Ratzenberger's fatal crash, neurosurgeon Sid Watkins even told Senna that he didn't really need to race anymore. But the burning passion for speed wasn't gonna let him give up. He started on the pole for the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. Right about lap 7, he had a slight lead over the 7-time world champion, Michael Schumacher. While Senna came up on the left turn, he couldn't really turn his car and went straight into the wall. And even though he was able to slow down his car, let's not forget the speed of a Formula One car. Sadly, he was only able to come down to about 130 miles an hour as he hit a concrete wall. And right after the crash, his right front wheel came up into the cockpit, striking him in the head. It was a pretty fatal blow, to say the least. He was left with a skull fracture and considerable blood loss after a piece of debris pierced through his helmet. What's more, there's Jules Bianchi at the 2014 Japan Grand Prix at number 6. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix called for new and enhanced safety measures which prevented another racing death for at least 2 decades. Sadly, right about 2014, the world of Formula One witnessed another tragedy at the 2014 Japan Grand Prix. If we're being honest, the weather played a huge role here because the rain messed up the track conditions. As Adrian Sutil spun off the track on lap 42, a crane removed his car from the corner right when Bianchi came in, driving straight into the crane through the corner. If anything, the crash destroyed his roll bar as the car slid right underneath the crane. As safety officials rushed to the scene, they found an unconscious Bianchi, and because of the weather, they couldn't fly him out to the hospital. Following this crash, there was a lot of controversy around it. Rumor has it, the officials made a mistake waving a green flag through that area, while others felt there should have been a safety car instead. Having said that, Bianchi's crash prompted Formula One to implement closed cockpits. If there had been a closed cockpit on this day, at least it would have prevented the severity of the accident. Following up at number 5, Daniil Kvyat at the British Grand Prix. Now, if we're being honest, Kvyat's accident, just like Stroll's, happened because the rear of his car failed. Having said that, since his crash scene was the concrete wall on the left-hand side of the Maggots and Beckett's complex at Silverstone, it's obvious that luck wasn't on his side. In fact, after spinning around, the AlphaTauri crashed into the front left corner against the barrier that left the car with all 4 wheels hanging on by their tethers, and nothing else. And since there was literally nothing the F1 driver could do, it only made this moment scarier. He lost all control over his car and was rendered a passenger as the car steered off-road at one of the most breathtaking corners on the calendar. Moving on to number 4, Romain Grosjean at the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix. Frankly, we haven't seen the worst of crashes in the past few years, and that's thanks to the constantly evolving safety standards of Formula One. Having said that, Grosjean gave us quite the scare right before the pandemic hit. In the first lap of the race, let's just say there was quite a bit of slack up in the back of the pack, and when Grosjean clipped the front of Daniil Kvyat's car, it sent him straight into a fence at 119 miles an hour. And with the angle he hit the fence, it ended up in a fireball crash where his car literally split in half. If we're being honest, the second you see a crash like that, you immediately think the worst. Like, come on, his car was literally cut in 2 pieces, and there was fire everywhere. Fans were fearful of Grosjean's condition. Having said that, thankfully, the driver compartment was perfectly intact. Grosjean left with second-degree burns, but that was the extent of it. If we're being honest, it was an unbelievable feat considering how dangerous the accident was. In fact, the Halo device, which was mandated back in 2018, is what prevented significant injuries in many crashes, especially this one. As for Grosjean, he said, "I think it's the greatest thing that we've brought to Formula One, and without it, I wouldn't be able to speak with you today." Following up at number 3, we've got Gilles Villeneuve at the 1982 Belgian Grand Prix. Back in 1982, let's just say Gilles was definitely one of the most popular drivers in Formula One. Now, before every race, the drivers engage in a qualifying session to set the starting lineup, and in the final session, Gilles was literally 0.01 seconds behind Didier Pironi for 6th place. So when he came back on track, he tried to improve his time, and that's when he came over a hill and approached a much slower car. At this point, he was a bit confused as to which side he should pass on, which led him to rear-ending the car, sending him airborne. Not only did his car flip a bunch of times, but he was also thrown from the car, after which his body came to rest up against a nearby fence. Despite safety officials rushing him away on a helicopter, he had a fatal neck fracture, which left him on life support before his eventual death that evening. There's no doubt that this was one of the worst Formula One crashes we've ever seen. In fact, watching his body fly from the car was nothing less than horrifying. Coming up at number 2, Niki Lauda at the 1976 German Grand Prix. If we're being honest, many people literally refer to the Nürburgring circuit as one of the most dangerous tracks back in the 70s, and that was on a clean track. Clearly, the 76 German Grand Prix didn't have that. Due to bad weather, specifically the rain, the race was supposed to be cancelled, and Niki Lauda was one of the few drivers who voted against running the race. But since most drivers voted in favor of the race, it went on as scheduled. Now, right after the first lap, most drivers pitted to put on dry tires as the rain eventually stopped. As for Lauda's car, it had just cleared a left kink on the second lap, and that's when his car snapped to the right, going straight into the wall as he entered the straightaway, leading to a fireball crash where he couldn't escape on his own. Thankfully, there were a few drivers who helped him get out of there, but that wasn't all. He suffered severe burns and even lapsed into a coma. But with a miracle, he eventually recovered from the crash and returned to racing about 6 weeks later. And not only did he return to the F1 grid, but he also grabbed 2 championships right before the end of his career. Now that's what we call a remarkable comeback. Finally, at number 1, Ronnie Peterson at the 1978 Italian Grand Prix. Now this was one of the season's very final races, and while Mario Andretti led the standings, Ronnie Peterson and Niki Lauda were pretty close too. And right after a crash, let's just say Peterson had quite a rough start to the weekend. Having said that, the green light came on even before the cars were on the line, which meant the cars at the back had a running start, and that's when James Hunt crashed into the back of Peterson's car, leaving it in flames. Despite the escape, Peterson suffered 27 fractures, after which his condition took a turn for the worst overnight, as he was declared dead the next morning. And that's a wrap for this video. Which of these crashes do you think was the most insane in Formula One history? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. We'll see you in the next one.